I'm very glad to be here, and it's a very interesting section that we have a very diverse topics. And I'm changing again, so I'm changing the rim from like remediation and pollution, and then to the GIS, the pollution assessment, and then to the sustainability. So to align with the theme, with the theme of resilience of our cities, then we emphasize the sustainability, urban development, and then the keywords that actually I'm emphasizing in this talk is actually the circular economy, and then how do we achieve that is by waste realization. So actually we start our research with like environmental pollution assessment, and then we look at the waste, we remediate it, we clean it, and then we use biochar. And afterwards we expanded the use of biochar into the waste realization for other emerging applications. So here's one of the examples that we're going to talk about. But before that, I actually hope to talk you into this topic with the food waste that we have daily. So what kind of status with our food waste is actually an untapped potential that our group is actively looking into it. Because most of the food waste we produce daily from along the food supply chain get waste, eventually end up in landfill or maybe other things. So we have some technologies which is quite mature, like composting and aerobic digestion, which are quite mature in it. But then they have different limitations in different cities that may not be applicable. For example, in Hong Kong, we do not have much farmland, so composting is actually cannot help us too much because we produce too much compost and end up in landfills again. And so anaerobic digestion is one of the ways with the energy production. But then we are looking into with being inspired with the science papers like 2012 about the waste valorization. Actually, there could be other options that could be more valuable compared to energy. We can produce something that is more valuable than energy as like the methane gas. So we can have a better potential that we can upscale and also valorize the waste in large scale. Which are the things that we are looking into now? Which are the chemicals? So chemicals, actually most of the chemicals can value more than the methane gas that you produce for anaerobic digestion. For example, from food wastes, with recent review is under review at the moment. So currently, we have done a lot of things with different chemicals production that actually with the other papers in the literature, including our work, then we can see a lot of chemicals, including biofuel and platform chemicals or farm chemicals that can be produced. So they could be building blocks from food waste. Actually, like antioxidants or like anti-cancer chemicals can also be extracted from food waste as well, through different approach, through biological approach or chemical approach. So in our case, we are focusing on biochemical approach. And later on, in the last part of my talk, I'll try to illustrate you how we can expand the use with the biochar so that we can tap these resources. So with the biochemical approach or with the thermochemical approach, that we can produce consumer chemicals that is long list, and we can have like a banana peels, for example, bakery waste, and then I'm sure that maybe Carol, my colleagues in CTU, will talk about bakery waste and also textile waste as well. That she's using the biochemical approach, while myself will be more on the thermochemical. So the table will turn you off, so we do not talk too much about the table. It is the information that you can see later on if our review get published in the next couple of months in this. So for biochemical, we need a fermentation, for example, that we can do the hydrolysate, and the hydrolysate produce sugar, and the sugars can help you convert into other chemicals or biofuel. And then we count on bacteria or yeast, that would be quite efficient, but then sometimes it takes longer time, and also the yeast and the bacteria itself has to be isolated, so it could be a costly procedure. And then we look further into thermochemical approach that we can make use of catalysts and make use of the solvent, and we can tailor the greeniness to use a green catalyst and a green solvent so that we can do the job. For example, from C5 sugar and C6 sugar, that we can produce a lot of different platform chemicals as identified by the US DOE. And of course, like through the hydrothermal or treatment with liquefaction or other things, that we can also, like pyrolysis, we can also produce bio oil or biogas, or with liquefaction, we can produce more bio oil or biodiesel from the food waste. And then the residue could be biochar. So with the palm oil or the cooking oil, so these are the other food waste along the food supply chain. There's something that you do not see in the kitchen, but that's produced in the supply chain. Actually, like the waste palm oil can be utilized as well. So that could be producing different kind of commodity chemicals, for example. What the details are, I will leave the details later on. If you're interested, maybe you can share with you the tables. So what we try to emphasize is a sustainable balance to enable a circular economy. So we want to take the waste. We want to make use of the waste into valuable, value-added chemicals. And then we emphasize that the biorefinery, the biochemical approach, and naturally the thermochemical approach can be aligned, that we can integrate. That's the things that we are doing together. So with our different expertise, we can actually integrate those approaches to be more efficient. And then we keep in mind that like the green chemistry, green engineering, so we are not trying to do something that create a lot of environmental impact. So these are things that we have to keep pushing, and there's a lot of room. Because conventionally, like for example, solvent itself is problematic. In many cases, they are widely used in the industry, but the solvent itself is not environmentally friendly. So it's like green solvent itself is already an area that we can take. And then the other resources that we can make use of is like CO2. To utilize the CO2 that we capture rather than just storage. We want to utilize CO2 as resources, just like the first speaker of the section, that we try to utilize CO2 to produce better biochar to mitigate the pH problem, and CO2 can help us solve our problem as well. So here is an example, to be more precise, for the original research, that kind of things that our group is actively doing. So we look at mainly sugar chemistry. So there's could be protein chemistry that we can play with, but currently we are mainly focusing on sugar chemistry. So the sugar that we play with will be from carbohydrates, from our food waste. And then we will make use of the chemical catalyst, and we want to produce some catalyst from waste as well. So here we see the interplay with biochar. So biochar conventionally we can apply for soil. It's still a very good use, and it's very useful and widespread use, and that will help our food security and the soil quality. That's the thing we're still doing and still going on. But we focus on the properties of biochar that can help us do a better job in the site remediation or the enhancement of soil qualities. At the same time, if we know enough of the properties of biochar, we can actually use it as a catalyst. So either it's a case that we use as a catalyst for environmental degradation, or in this case for the sugar conversion. So in the sugar conversion, we need several types of different reactions. For example, with hydrolysis, that will require the strong boracic acid to help you. Or afterwards, if you hydrolyze into mono sugars and monosaccharides, then we need to at least a key step, weight limiting step for the isomerization to turn it into fructose. That is actually the most useful building block, and that's where they more than double of the cost of the glucose. Then the things we can do is we count on uric acid from metals that we are familiar with, or we can count on the boracic base, that like for example amine or other things like metals that can help you. So afterwards, after we produce or convert something, we can to do a further upgrade like dehydration into the HMF, one of the things that we are very interested in as one of the 12 top platform chemicals of the DOE. And also with rehydration, then we can have the plenary acid as well. So it's also another one of the 12 platform chemicals that we're producing. And after this, for example, LA can be converted to GBL, so which is one of the things we are exploring that can be directly used as a biofuel. And then HMF and LA could be the building block for other pharmaceuticals and resin and so on. So the value will be much higher than the thin gas that we can produce. And how can we take the waste that we have? For example, the wood waste, that we have a lot of wood waste and forestry waste. And we are looking into the ways that we at the same time we produce bioenergy. So with pyrolysis or gasification, then we can produce biogas, syngas, and then we can produce biooil, but biooil is not that favorable. But then the residue itself, if we add some catalyst in the process, then we can actually activate the structure development, and also with the catalyst itself, like for example tin, which is quite a useful catalyst that can be used, and is less toxic than chromium and zirconium, so they'll be better, and also cost is not that high. The other metal that we select and published recently in green chemistry is aluminum biochar. So aluminum, we also saw that with the LCA and the cost benefit analysis, is actually more greener than the tin as well. So actually, this one is under review. This is currently ongoing work. So with tin, actually the tin solution or tin presence actually help us develop better biochar because itself is actually an acidic characteristics. So at the same time, we are having something like acid catalyst or acid activation of the biochar development, so that we can produce biochar with more porous structures. And then with the porous structures, the key thing is how do we control the transformation of the metals and the biochar. So we have two things to tailor. One is the biochar support, the structure, the aromatic structures, the electron transfer, and also the functionality of the biochar to host your metal catalyst. And the other key things that the hurdles that we need to tailor is the species of metal itself, whether it's which one is active, whether it's tin oxide that's active, or metallic tin that's active, or the other form, whether it's crystalline or amorphous that's active. Then we can actually tailor our process to enhance the biogas synthesis at the same time to get the biochar we need. That's a metal biochar composite or catalyst that we can use. So what we do is like we change the temperature and also make use of the CO2 gas as, so that to enhance the solid gas phase interaction reaction with the Bonduet reaction of the CO2, so that we can break down more carbon, bring it into the gas, and also break down VOCs, break down PAH. At the same time, the solid carbon, the biochar itself will be more porous and more aromatic. So here is structured, for example, and we see that with the tin inclination, we can actually have some tin particles or the tin inclinator on the surface of the biochar with structures, well, with different structures that we have a different loading. So we look into the species and try to see which part of the species of the metals will be effective. And also for our purpose in this case will be the isomerization, for example. But actually that could be a good variety. We can play with other different types of metal biochar and we play with different reactions. And also like with a very interesting discussion just now briefly with Brother Drew, there's a good potential with the microbial interaction as well. That's a thing that we can tap further. So with the biochar and with the way we produce it and with the mineral content into it, there will be a lot of variety in terms of the species, the inorganic species and the carbon structures and the electron transfer. So with that, we see that we can produce different kind of biochar and then different kind of the tin species. For example, tin oxide, and then amorphous tin and also metallic tin. And with the conversion later on, we see that we can be achieving the efficiency of the catalysis comparable to more expensive catalysts, like the expensive catalysts like MOF, metal organic flammable that you can produce that can be reported, or the modified zeolite. That's much more expensive because they're produced on purpose and using a lot of chemicals that some of the chemicals are actually potentially hazardous. So in this case, in our case, we're producing from waste. We're taking the waste and then we use one waste to tap into the engine materials and then we solve another waste problem. So here we can produce like the 20% or so the yield, which are comparable with the literature with other solid catalysts, so that with the know-how we can produce the biochar we need. And then there will be controlling the conditions and also the way we implement the metals or different metals. And then we look further into the conversion of the chemicals and the carbon utilization. So this is one of the ways that we're looking further into is the carbon efficiency. Because we can produce a chemical we need, but the hurdles currently we're still trying to do it better, push further. It's about the carbon efficiency of the use of the sugars, or for example, or the carbohydrate in our food waste. How can we utilize them more efficiently into producing value-added chemicals rather than into low-grade, a lot of heterogeneous, like humans type materials? So here's the things we're still trying to enhance further to have a higher catalytic activity, while at the same time we reduce the side reactions. So it's a balance that we need to pay with. And side reaction is also usually give you something that is unfavorable as impurities. And as impurities actually is hurt with the recycling. And then with the, for example, with the CO2 utilization or with the nitrogen normal situation, we can see a difference with the carbon structures. And then that will actually to facilitate the production of the active amorphous species of the tin that could be helping us to convert sugar into HMF and array, for example, as well. And then recyclability is the hurdle that we are still trying to address, which is related to the carbon efficiency, because if the impurities of those low-grade carbon that like human-like material or humic substance material, like there's actually coating on the surface, there's fouling our solid catalyst. So with the reuse that we can see, we can still maintain some kind of efficiency, maybe 2/3 of the first time, and in the situation, the passivation will be more stable after 2 or 3 cycles. So we still can achieve certain extent of the efficiency with these kind of weight-wise materials. And then the tin speciation will be changing during the reaction as well. So a final recap, so biochar has a good potential that we are like to tapping one waste to to sort another waste, which is also very abundant problem like food waste, which we produce a lot. And also at the same time, we need to safeguard our food security from the soil and environmental perspective. That is things we can also pay with voucher, and also we are doing that as well. So these are the two mainstream of the main directions of our group, what that is going on. So with that, thank you very much, and hope to bring you to Hong Kong, that's PolyU, and hope to bring you to PolyU next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. I have one.
Thank you.
It's an extremely hot topic, the fact that we're trying to produce our commodity chemicals from biomass. What is the current state in terms of price? Is it still 3 times more expensive, or is it still 100 times more expensive? How far are we from the feasibility of really moving into this bio-based economy and move away from the petrol-based society?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That depends on the end product that we have, the end product, the purities, and the separation. So with the end products, for example, that we're focusing on HMF and LA, they are actually valued much more than fructose and glucose. And also like in the case that we are focusing on fructose rather than glucose, because fructose is more than like 2-3 times more valuable than glucose. And the value of the chemicals that we can produce is actually depending on the end products that we can transform or upgrade into. So like for example, if you're using it in the pharmaceuticals, for example, antioxidants that we can extract from food waste, and those antioxidants can be blended into our nutritional dietary, and then that could be a good value. So whether theoretically the value of the products is high enough to justify the cost of justify the process. But the only thing is how do we optimize that so we can scale up the process that can be scalable, and also at the same time make sure it's green enough, because sometimes we use solvent. At the beginning we use solvent DMSO, which we turn out that we find that it's actually not that environment friendly. So later on we shift to like the other greener solvent like GBL or PC, propylene carbonate, or the GBL as well itself is a solvent, greener solvent. So a lot of variety that we can actually tap the room and to improve the potential. But I guess there's at least like with the depending on the product that you have. If you have a high value, then you can justify more complicated costs, but we have to keep in mind the greeniness and environmental friendly of the nature of the process.
So I understand that the economics are not the big bottleneck, but that is still also a lot of technological issues. There's room for one more question.
In Japan, some food waste or other organic waste is used for just a feed for swine or chicken. Swine or chicken. And that preparation is very easy. Just autoclave for some sanitization, then apply. Such a system is more cheap and cost benefit, especially in like Hong Kong, small area but heavy density of livestock.
Yeah.
Do you think about it?
Yeah, I agree. So I'm not saying that we only have one solution to food waste. We should have multiple solutions depending on the feedstock as well. Like we talk about the end products, and then the feedstock is also playing a very big role. If we have like food waste from our kitchen, which is heterogeneous, I'm not suggesting you to do all these kind of things because it's too complicated and a lot of impurities that will compromise your efficiency, and it's not just justified by cost. For the food waste from our plates, from our restaurants, then like animal feed or anaerobic digestion would be a very good option. And also composting, if you have farmland, would be a very good option as well. But then for those food waste from our food supply chain, that could be more pure. Like for example, we have a collaboration with the Hong Kong International Airport. Then they have a lot of food waste which is well sorted from a catering facility. Then those kind of food waste, the waste stream would be the good substrate that we can tap it into value-added chemicals. So I guess we may need different distributions, maybe 20% AD, 30% animal feed, and then maybe 10% to add chemicals. Different kind of distribution.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you also.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let's thank the speaker again. And now I'm